Good morning, everyone. My name is Amanda Burkich, and I'd like to thank you for joining us live here today from the ViaSport Broadcast Center. ViaSport is proud to be able to host the technical briefing you're about to watch on behalf of the province of BC and the Ministry of Community, Sport and Cultural Development. So thanks again for taking the time to tune in. Beside me here in studio today is Assistant Deputy Minister David Galbraith. Good morning. And BC's Athletic Commissioner Dave Maedel.
Morning.
Thanks for joining us. They will be providing us with an overview on some recent changes in legislation of amateur and professional combat sport in BC today. They'll also be getting into more detail on how these new regulations can be applied to your sport programming, something I'm sure will be useful to all of our viewers today. But before I turn it over to Dave and David, I did want to remind everyone that we will be taking your questions at the end of today's presentation. So in preparation for that, I invite viewers to email us at questions@viasport.ca, and we'll try to address them at the end of the presentation. On that note, David, over to you.
Great. Thanks very much. I'd first like to say thanks to everyone who's taking part today or who's watching from home or from their office. We appreciate you taking the time out of your busy schedule to be here with us today. Basically, we're here to talk about a number of the changes that have occurred recently to the regulation of amateur and professional combat sports in the province of BC. The first key thing to realize is that there's two pieces of governing legislation here in BC and in Canada, the first being the Federal Criminal Code. The second is the province's Athletic Act of BC. And associated with those two pieces of legislation are regulations that help define what the rules are that we operate under here in BC. As many of you know, back in June there was some changes to the Criminal Code of Canada which led to and prompted a number of changes here in BC and consequently across Canada. And basically the piece that's, I think, the most critical to look at is the piece that says a contest between amateur athletes in a combative sport with fists, hands or feet held in a province with the permission of the province's Lieutenant Governor and Council or any other person or body specified by him or her. What that basically means is that under the federal legislation, each of the provinces has the ability to interpret and to act upon combat sports in their province the way that they choose to act. So basically what that means is that provinces have the ability to designate for an amateur combat sport any person or body to basically to grant permission or to exempt sports that they choose from requiring any kind of permission status. What's critical to understand is that these laws impact the entire province wherever an event is potentially going to be held. If they require permission, whether it be in a community center or whether it be on First Nations property, it's still governed by these two laws. So what ended up happening here in BC? So based on the requirements of the Criminal Code, we had to take forward a paper to get decision through what's called an order in council, which effectively means that Cabinet makes the decisions on how we're going to approach this here in BC. What that's meant here is that the first piece of it is that those sports that are competed on the International Olympic or Paralympic Committee, such as boxing, wrestling, taekwondo, and judo, are exempt from any further regulations here in BC. The second piece of it is that the province decided that it would exempt a number of sports from requiring any further permissions. Those are what I'll call more traditional martial arts of the wushu, karate, kung fu, grappling, and jiu-jitsu. All of those are exempt from being administered or being adjudicated by the province. Lastly, what the OIC also identified is said that with regard to amateur mixed martial arts, kickboxing, pankration, and Muay Thai, as all of these require permission for those events to occur legally here in BC. And the other designation that occurred is that these events, the amateur events, would need the permission of the Office of the BC Athletic Commissioner, which is Dave, sitting beside me here. The other piece that occurred was not only on the amateur side, but on the professional side. The change was that Bill S-209 also legalized MMA as long as it has the permission of an athletic board or commission. So what we have is that Dave is responsible here in BC for boxing and MMA in this province. Those are the two sports, two combat sports that he's responsible and accountable for the province. At this time, based on legal counsel's advice, there is not going to be an expansion of professional beyond those two sports, and those two sports are governed by the provincial legislation of the Athletic Act of BC and any of the associated regulations. So I think getting into what actually is occurring on the ground and what Dave's rules are and how the approach is, I'll hand it over to Dave.
Thanks, David. So the points that I have are at a relatively high level. Further information is available on the BC Athletic Commissioner's website, and we'll have the address for you a little bit later. But on the whole, for an amateur competition, the organizations must have an event permit that you apply for and receive through my office. You have to follow the rules as set by my office. You must use BC Athletic Commissioner licensed officials. You have to submit security and medical plans, and those will detail the medical resources that you have, the physicians, the medical exams that are required, the first aid facilities on site, those kinds of things. Contestants must be registered in my office and comply with the medical and blood work requirements as stated by my office. Contestants must be properly matched. At this time, there are no fees associated with gaining permission from the BCAC. The promoter remains responsible for all costs. And lastly, a representative from my office will attend your competition to ensure compliance with the regulations and event conditions that are set. Slightly different for a sanction of a professional event. A professional event is guided by the Athletic Act, and there are some very specific requirements in there. The rules are different. The medical requirements are stricter. There are fees associated with permits and licenses, and the officials are supplied by my office directly rather than with an amateur event where we will give the promoter the list of approved officials and let them choose from that list. More information is located on the website of the BC Athletic Commissioner. Address is there, or you can contact us directly at the 1-855-952-6760 toll-free number, or email athletic.commissioner@gov.bc.ca.
Great. Thanks very much for your presentation today, Dave and David. So as Dave mentioned, you can follow up by forwarding your questions that route, but we do have a few minutes left to answer some questions today, so I'm going to dive right into them now. First question. Will training of amateur officials occur similarly to the professional training offered by this BCAC?
The requirements for professional official or amateur official are different, but the training is similar. So if you are licensed at a professional level, you will also be able to officiate at an amateur level, but you may be, if you're licensed as an amateur, you may not be allowed to officiate it at a professional level at all. That all depends on your specific qualifications, and I'm more than happy to discuss the specifics through the contact information that we provided earlier.
Great. Second question here. Would there be a separation of the officials between pro and amateur, or would they be able to work both portions of the event?
Again, I think I addressed that in the answer to the first question. Basically, the requirements are similar, but not exactly the same. So we'll have to look at that on a case-by-case basis. And if anybody has any questions about their qualifications, get in touch, and I'll give you a specific answer to that.
Great, thanks, Dave. Third question here. Is there a time frame for the inclusion at a professional level of the remaining combative sports currently not regulated?
I'll take a stab at answering this one. The short answer is no in the short term, based on legal counsel's advice here in BC and the province's interpretation of the Criminal Code Act and the changes of Section 209. The two sports that we can regulate here in BC is boxing and mixed martial arts on a professional basis, and until there is a change to that, that will be how and what the province will be regulating.
Here's another one here. How would an amateur Muay Thai association in BC apply to regulate amateur Muay Thai events?
They wouldn't.
Regulation of amateur Muay Thai events is the purview of the Office of the BC Athletic Commissioner. In terms of regulation, I think there's still a role for an amateur Muay Thai association to run events, but the regulation of the events is the BC Athletic Commissioner at this point.
Okay, thank you for that, Dave. I'm getting a hand wave. I think there may be some more coming through, so thank you for your patience while we funnel them to the screen. All right. What are the medical regulations for a pro athlete to get licensed for a fight? And what is the timeline these medicals must occur?
All of that information is available on the website. It's quite detailed and specific, and there are various forms that are required. So the best thing to do is to go directly to the website. On the front page, you'll find 3 buttons: professional, amateur, and pro-am. Follow the professional link, and once you get there, there's a section for persons who want to compete in a professional event, and there's instructions, and all of the forms are there. Again, any questions once you've had a chance to look at that information, give me a call at the office and we can sort it out.
Okay, I believe there are some more coming through, so thank you for sending these in to questions@viasport.ca. Next question, what are the first steps that kickboxing can take to ensure events are held legally?
Again, all of that information is on the website. The best thing to do is to start corresponding with my office about 60 days in advance of your event. We'll provide you with the information and the application forms to get all of the event permits and licensing and registrations that you require.
And if I can just add to that, Dave, and just to be clear, what Dave is referencing is an amateur event. At this point, professional kickboxing isn't illegal, nor is it an event that we can regulate at this point based on the province's interpretation of the changes to the criminal code.
Okay, so it sounds like that's a wrap for questions today. Unfortunately, that's all the time that we have, but thank you to our speakers, Dave and David, for joining us today at the ViaSport Broadcast Center. And I'm sure the information that you both provided are definitely going to be helpful to all of our viewers out there and answer a lot of questions about these changes in legislation. Before I sign off, I actually want to let everybody know as well that this video will be posted on the ViaSport YouTube channel, so if you want to pass it along or refer to it in the future, it will be there. And again, if you have any remaining questions, the information is on the screen here that you can use to contact Dave's office with those questions, and there it is again. So leave that for just a second, make a note of that, and I will say thanks again for joining us. Have a great afternoon, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for taking the time out.